Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. It is Thursday, our regularly scheduled show for once. It seems like we're going further and further off of schedule every week, and that's kind of a deliriously wonderful thing, to be honest with you, because we like breaking the rules around here. I am joined by two rule breakers today, although only one of them is on camera at the moment. I'm joined by the masterminds of a show called Penny Dreadful's Shilling Shockers, which is a modern horror host show. The two ladies joining me, Danielle Galerter and Rebecca Paiva, are both Horror Hall of Fame inductees. They've been running their show for a number of years, but the better part of it, like Penny's under a decade, and they have just an insatiable love for the horror genre, as you'll discover, including my soft spot, which is, of course, older Golden Age horror. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Hello, forlorn Dixon. It's excellent to see you. Oh, hey, Rebecca.
Hello, Penny. How are you?
Sorry, I've been waiting a week to call him forlorn Dixon, so that's the best I can do. I'm sorry.
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty good restraint for you.
Thank you. See, I've matured over the years.
Don't say that too proudly. I'm not sure if maturing is a benefit in today's world, to be honest.
Well, I am 700 years old, dear. So it's at my age, I'm middle-aged now in witch years. You see, there's no distinction anymore. It's all Danielle, Penny. It's all one thing. This is what happens during the quarantine times. And it's just like, I just have myself to talk to. I have this portrait, this Daniel Horn portrait that talks to me, and I listen to what it tells me to do. But I hope, oh geez, that's on camera now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like 7 degrees of like serial killer. That's probably not. If the neighbor's dog starts talking to you, we have issues. So.
Do you mean that not everyone has paintings of themselves hanging in their living room?
No one wants a painting of myself, including me. So we're good. We're good. So let's start with Danielle. Danielle, introduce yourself to those who might not be familiar with your work, and reacquaint yourself, or maybe recontextualize yourself to those who are.
Okay, so I'm Danielle Galerter, also known as TV horror hostess Penny Dreadful. I have been doing the horror host show Shilling Shockers with Rebecca for, we started production in 2005, and so we were on TV regularly for about 10 years. And, we had a pretty good run there, a lot of great times that we had over the years. And then subsequently now we've kind of moved to doing annual Halloween specials and occasional appearances at conventions.
And that's in the greater New England area.
Yes, haunted New England, indeed.
You need to make it a little further south so that we can meet up at a convention. That's just how it is.
All right, it's a deal.
Because Jersey has more conventions than anywhere else on the planet, right?
That's right. Chiller's there,
We've certainly traveled for some conventions. Well, we've gone to Virginia and Pennsylvania and Ohio. Mm-hmm. And Penny, you went to Kentucky once, yeah?
Yeah, for Wonderfest. Yeah, I went down to Wonderfest.
I don't recommend going to Kentucky.
Sorry, Kentucky.
Well, no, we have plenty of good friends of the show that are from Kentucky. That's why I'm saying.
Good chicken there.
Rebecca, could you do the same for me? Could you introduce yourself to an audience that may or may not already know and love you?
I would love to. I doubt that they know and love me already, but
everybody loves you, Becky.
My name is Rebecca Paiva. I've been friends with Danielle since I was 18, maybe, and she was 21. Well, 700 and whatever.
720, 689.
And whether I'm talking about Penny or Danielle, I suppose. And we had lots of good times and did a bunch of theater together before we started doing Shilling Shockers. We did improv. We met actually at an open stage night in college called Experimental Stage. And we started hanging out and we did a lot of improv, and we've done some actual on-stage shows together. And back in 2005, she posted all of these fantastic photos of her and her husband dressed as a witch and a werewolf on MySpace, because that's what we were using back in the day. And I thought I had missed a party or something. I was like, wow, you guys look great. What's going on? And then she roped me into the show, and we've been having fun with that ever since.
So I always start every show basically with this question. So at your leisure, how did you get bit by the horror bug? What was the childhood memory? What was the inciting incident?
Okay. You're probably going to be hearing this name a lot during this interview, but it was my Uncle Valdemar. And that is indeed his real name, Valdemar. We call him Uncle Val for short, but his full name is Valdemar. And he was, when he came, he's my mom's brother, and they came to America from Portugal, from the Azorian island of St. Michael, where Rebecca's dad is also from. And he was a kid when he came here. He was about 9 years old, and it was 1967, and it was during the big classic horror boom was going on. Famous Monsters of Filmland was going on. All the classic horror movies were on TV. And Uncle Val got really hardcore into, he was a monster kid. He is what's known as a monster kid. And so when I was a kid in the 70s, Uncle Val used to love to try and scare me, and he would give me he'd play his Pickwick horror records and turn the lights off and do a Boris Karloff impression, like, "Oh, welcome to my laboratory," And so he would give me his famous Monsters of Filmland magazines, and I remember the beautiful Basil Gogos paintings on the cover of the Mummy. I remember distinctly, and being both repulsed and fascinated at the same time by that. And I'd flip through them and look at them, and he'd give me his horror comics, and I'd cut out like pictures of the Aurora model kits and stuff. And so one day, he was the first person I knew who got a VCR. He had one of the early 80s top loading VCR, big clunky thing. And he lived with my grandparents, and we would go visit, and he said, hey, I got The Wolfman, you want to watch it? Or I got The Bride of Frankenstein, you want to watch it with me? Like, he'd get horror movies, and then it just, every time I went, it was like Hammer movies, Universal, Hammer, Vincent Price, Corman films, those beautiful Poe films. He would get stuff like that, and Dark Shadows. He was a big Dark Shadows fan growing up. I am too. He got this, I mean, I always heard about it growing up, but it was like this sort of thing you couldn't see because it wasn't running on TV until it showed up in syndication, and he started getting like these grainy tapes, and I got really hooked by that. When Barnabas's hand came out of the coffin and grabbed Willie Loomis, he grabbed me too, because I got really hardcore bitten by the Dark Shadows bug. And so it was like all the time, it was like monsters. He gave me a book of Edgar Allan Poe stories too, and just he was like instrumental in getting me hooked, and it never went away. Like, I just always had that love for it and that fascination for that stuff,
That's awesome. Yeah. What about you, Rebecca?
Well, probably my first entrance into horror was when I was in 5th grade. I remember we had this snowstorm, and my whole family was huddled in the living room, and my dad was changing channels, and we got to A&E, and the Broadway musical Sweeney Todd was on A&E. And so actually it was sort of an introduction into musical theater as well. But that play, and I remember it was George Hearn and Angela Lansbury, and they were singing about making people into pies. And that was transformative for me that night during a snowstorm, and a picture that kept getting all snowy and weird because the weather was bad. Remember when that used to happen? Yeah. So that really got me interested in horror, because I couldn't believe I was watching this story with my parents, who were not, nobody in my family was interested in horror. They weren't into that at all, but they were very much into theater. And I watched this, and the dark side of the musical really excited me, and I started reading Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King. And then I was either in 8th or 9th grade, and Tales from the Crypt came on HBO, and I got instantly addicted to that. That was my first real horror host. I mean, when I was a kid, I would occasionally watch a creature feature on a Saturday afternoon, because that used to air out of Boston PBS. And my mom used to watch Dialing for Dollars on Sundays. And I remember occasionally there was a horror movie. There was a great Elizabeth Bathory movie. But it was really just, starting to read the Poe and then watching Tales from the Crypt. And then I got really into Stephen King and some other horror writers. And then I met Danny, and Danny was at a level of horror fandom that I had not yet achieved. But Danny has a real enthusiasm for those things in life that she feels passionate about, and she pulls other people into her passions with her, I would say. And so Danny's love of horror fed on my already existing love of horror. And but really, us starting Shilling Shockers was totally her brainchild. And I was just glad that I was there and her friend.
We hit it off right away. We just simpatico right away.
Well, I'm jealous, because when I was in school, I felt like there was no one else that was part of this thing. No one else cared about these silly movies like I did. And that wasn't entirely true. I did have a few people eventually. But even then, it was kind of like you couldn't really just talk in public about it. It was still a little bit just weird. So you'd get your one or two friends that were into it aside, and hey, did you see that last night? It was on. But it wasn't something you could just be just completely open about. Mm-hmm. Which was probably the social structure of the late 1980s in high school. But
what area of the country are you in?
New Jersey.
Oh, right. You said. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, no one was going to beat us with a brick or anything for liking horror, but certainly you weren't going to be one of the cool kids, for whatever that was worth. Looking back now, it was worth absolutely nothing, but, when you're a kid. So how did you guys actually meet? Do you remember the first day?
Yes.
Yeah,
the first time we met was not when we really became friends, so my first year of college, I was a musical theater major at Emerson, and I came home during spring break, and this guy I was dating at the time, who lived near UMass Dartmouth, he was not a student there, but he had found out about Experimental Stage, this weekly improv games and music. It was sort of like an open mic, except there was no mic. It was an open stage. And so people would get up and sing a song, or they would read their poetry or what have you. And so my boyfriend at the time brought me to stage and introduced me to some of the people running stage. And Danielle was one of them, and they were doing an improv game. And since I was studying theater, they invited me to go up on stage with them and do improv. And I did that night. And we did a game called Authors. There were 4 of us telling us the same story, but as though we were different authors. And Danielle was doing her story as Edgar Allan Poe.
As you
I
do.
was assigned Danielle Steele.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And then no, it was fine because
Chuck
I
was
got to
Tolkien.
take
I remember our friend Chuck was Tolkien.
Chuck was, yeah, our friend Chuck was J.R.R. Tolkien, who during his part of the story, he just launched into lineage and who was son of who. And then the last, this girl Maggie was Shel Silverstein. And so she started speaking in verse whenever it was her turn. But that was when I first met Danny. But then I went back to Emerson and didn't see her again until the following fall. I actually transferred to UMass from Emerson for various reasons that aren't interesting to go into here. But then I met her again because I went to stage because I had already been there once. And we started hanging out.
Yeah. I remember when I was had to do Poe, I grabbed like a piece of electrical tape and slapped it across my upper lip so I could have a mustache. And then I grabbed a black coat and wrapped myself in my black coat. That was fun. Yeah, and we hit it, like I said earlier, like we hit it off right away. And subsequently, after we started doing this, the improv thing kind of turned into its own thing. We were the Rational Anarchists at first, and then we changed our name to Chuck's Cousin. And because our friend Chuck used to bring his cousin to the improv all the time. And so we wound up doing a sketch comedy show called Isn't This Ridiculous? And Rebecca and I were both like heavily involved in this sketch comedy show. We both performed in it. It was for local cable access, and it was a real cheeseball thing, but we did a lot of fun stuff with it. We did a lot of the sketches were dark humor, with horror elements thrown into a lot of them. Like we did one with the Count from Sesame Street. This is kid in therapy because he did a scene with the Count during Sesame Street, and he had this, flashback to the Count killing all the cast members. He's a vampire, and then there's the whole deal with the Count. I remember he had a letter. He took two letters, because the Count is into numbers. So the kid looked two letters and made like a cross.
He took a lowercase L and a capital I.
That's what it was.
And he held them together in a cross.
Yes. Yeah.
Drive off the Count. And that's how
yeah.
he survived the episode.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And then we had, the Hamburglar, like a really dark Hamburglar story, which we actually brought back for Shilling Shockers. So we were doing that stuff at that time. And this was around 98. And during this time, our friend Ivan, who plays Manfred von Bülow in the show, the semi-retired monster hunter who lives next door to Penny Dreadful, he was involved in this sketch show at the time too. And I remember we were talking about doing a horror host show at that time, but we're like, oh, it'd be really cool to do a horror host show. I knew of horror hosts like Rebecca growing up. We had Creature Double Feature, but it wasn't hosted. The first host I remember was actually Commander USA on the USA Network, who was like a superhero, but he showed like Paul Naschy movies and old horror movies. And so we talked about it, but we didn't know anything about public domain movies or how to do something like that. So, but the talk was already starting during that time. And then after that, like Rebecca and I continued to participate in theater projects and a variety of other things that we always like stayed involved with different things that we were working on. We'd usually collaborate on stuff. And then eventually that did lead to the horror host thing.
And in fact, just to add to what she was saying, Danny and I had been working together on a short play immediately as Shilling Shockers was starting.
Oh, the Grand Guignol show, yeah.
Yeah, Danielle directed a Grand Guignol play called The Final Kiss. She was directing, and I was in it as well as Ivan, who plays Dr. Manfred von Bülow, our friend John Sofchek, who has a recurring role on Shilling Shockers called, he's one of Manfred's monster hunting buddies called Alabaster Van Sloan. And anyway, we had just spent the late morning rehearsing The Final Kiss. And afterwards I said, oh, hey, Danny, where are you going? and she's like, actually, we're going to go shoot an episode of a new horror host show we're working on. You want to come? And I went, and I ended up running camera, and that was how we got into Shilling Shock.
And she eventually became the director on the show, because at first we were kind of tag teaming the editing, or it was mostly you. I was doing a little bit, but you were so advanced.
In season 1, you edited more episodes than I did.
I don't know about that. You were, I mean, it was clear you had a real ability to do that. So, I mean, visually speaking, the show, Rebecca has elevated the show to a level that it never would have gotten to, because she is brilliant at constructing the look of a scene and then editing the scene together, and it came out really good. So and then you started doing After Effects and all of this amazing special effects work. Now, Lorne, just a side note, I want to jump back. Lorne, are you familiar with The Final Kiss?
I'm not.
Oh my God. Okay, so I have to do a side tangent on this. So the Final Kiss, the Grunging. Are you familiar with the Grunging, the theater, the horror?
Of
theater?
course. Of course.
Right. So there's
John Softcheck just in the chat, it says, I saw that play. Amazing.
Oh, that's great. John, you're here. Hello,
Yay.
John.
Yay.
John is our friend and has been in our show.
Yes, yeah, John. We've done so much with John. He was amazing in that.
And in addition to Alabaster Van Sloan, last year's Halloween special, he starred as the ghost of Orson Welles.
Orson Welles. That's right. He nailed it too. He's brilliant.
He actually really looks like Orson Welles when he gets the hat and the coat on. It's like, geez.
He has the beard.
It's really
are we talking young Orson Welles who still gave a shit, or later? Like, I don't want to read this commercial byline, so I'm going to make it up instead.
Frozen peas.
During a California wine commercial, Orson Welles.
Awesome.
I actually just watched him in Jane Eyre. He was amazing in Jane Eyre. And
that's not an insult, John. I realized that might have sounded like I was down. No, it's just that you have that bearded.
I love
gravitas thing going on.
I love doing shows with John. I miss doing shows with John. But The Final Kiss is about is a man who was going to leave his wife, I believe, and then she threw acid in his face. So the play takes place in a hospital, and his face is bandaged up, and they're tending to his wounds, and the wife he calls the wife to come to see him, because he wants to tell her that he forgives her. And so she comes to visit him in the hospital, and of course the entire thing is a trap, and he ends up getting terrible revenge by pouring acid in her face. Of course, with the Grand Guignol, it's all about the sort of visceral effect. So we had this thing, what was it? It was Vaseline mixed with strawberry jelly.
Yeah, we had a little bowl under the couch where we had a premix of Vaseline and strawberry jelly all stirred up. And so at the end of the play, when I'm saying goodbye, like, he grabs me and pulls me down, and I was on my knees on the floor in front of the couch, and he was sitting behind me, and he grabbed my hair and pulled my face back, and he just had like
apple juice, I think, right?
No, it was carbonated so that it would have bubbles. So I think, I don't remember if it was ginger ale or what, but he would pour this stuff on my face, and I would scream and go down, and I would snake my hand under the couch, grab a handful of this crap from the bowl of Vaseline and strawberry jelly, and just go over my face. And when I brought my face back up, there were globs of stuff falling off my face.
And the audience reacted.
The audience would scream like, because it was
not as loud as you screamed.
My
it was
face
amazing.
falling off, and the every time the audience had this big kind of reaction.
And then he takes his bandage off, and there was a grotesque special effect that our friend Melissa Freitas did, and then he kisses her, which we took from the EC comic, because the play I don't think ends with him doing that, but they adapted it for the Tales from the Crypt for the EC comics. So we took that ending from the EC comics because it's just a nice way to kind of clinch the show. But yeah, that was around that time that we were starting the horror host show.
Yeah. And as a side note, that whole Vaseline and strawberry jelly concoction wiped off pretty easy, and my face was so nice and soft after.
See, there's a happy ending after all.
You didn't think you were going to get beauty tips on this show, did you, Lorne?
Well, I could probably use them. So Jess Graham has a question, which we'll get back to the narrative proper, but I want to make sure we don't lose any questions that come through. Jess Graham asks, what was Danielle and Rebecca's favorite public domain horror movie that they screened on their show?
Oh, that's a good question. Yikes.
Well, it's my favorite horror movie of all time is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And we finally screened that in, I believe it was season 8, episode 5. But that was like, I had an agenda to show that movie. The best public domain horror movie that I discovered because of Shilling Shockers was one that Danielle had picked, Carnival of Souls.
Oh, that's a good one.
Directed by Herc Harvey, and that is such a wonderful movie.
It is.
Yeah. It's very
amazing. What's crazy is that movie is missing a reel, and it's still amazing.
Which reel is missing? I didn't know that.
It's literally missing a reel of footage, which has been lost to time.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
And it's seamless still to this day. So it's amazing on many respects.
You wouldn't know it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I think film does more with silence than any other film ever.
Yeah, very eerie. Yeah, I think my favorite film, the public domain film that we showed was probably the Chaney Phantom of the Opera, the original Universal one. It's still my favorite version of the Phantom of the Opera in cinema. You know, I mean. Claude Rains is wonderful, and so is Herbert Lom. But Chaney just really captured that otherness of the Phantom. You know, he just was wonderful.
Oh, so absolutely, yeah. I'm going to get real nerdy on you for a second. Was this before or after they restored the color sequence for the Mask of the Red Death sequence in the film?
It was a pre-restored version. I mean, it is. No, it does have. When we showed it had the color.
But
the color sequence is in there.
For various reasons, we cannot ever show restored prints of the film because the restoration itself is copyrighted.
Right.
So the films that we show, I can never go grab the good disc with the Kino or Criterion cleaned up release. Although it's worth noting that I'm held to prints that either like I can download from archive.org or obtain in some other legal way because we're trying really hard to keep the show above board and doing everything right. Working at RISD has been good because a couple of times I've had access to print, like film prints that I can digitize. But for season 8, which was our silent film season, I actually did, like from a crappier print, did a lot of restoration on my own. Like I got a copy, for instance, of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I retinted, like I just had a crap black and white copy and I retinted all of the scenes in the way that they were meant to be seen. And I did all new intertitles and stuff like that. So we do try to.
And we got music too. We got people to do music for some of those movies as well, like the Viennagram and our friend James Bond, who's a music professor and music composer. So we had a few people do.
Yeah, Jamie gave me a new score for Metropolis. Yeah. And when we had done a live hosting of Dr. Caligari, we got a local band called the Viennagram who performed along with the film. So they actually recorded that performance for us and gave us permission to use it. So in our episode where we show Caligari, it has a live original soundtrack by the band the Viennagram, and I did tinting myself and new intertitles and everything.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So let's back up a little bit. No, let's back up a lot. The horror host thing is very much an Americana movement because it's something that couldn't really have started anywhere else. Commonly, people say that 1954 with Vampira, it begins, but it's that show is kind of an island into itself at that time, with not a lot of imitations of it until in '57, Universal packages all their classic Universal monster films for television because these films had fallen on hard times. The stations didn't want really to play them anymore. They were thought of as old hat. So they put this package together, which was extremely affordable, and a lot of UHF stations were able to purchase it. And Universal actually suggested in the marketing materials to have your local weatherman or anyone you could dress up as a character and introduce the movies. And it's just so interesting to me that something that began so small would snowball and snowball. And, there's no good reason for hosts to exist anymore as from a practical standpoint. We don't need shows to deliver this material to us anymore. We have access to everything instantaneously whenever we want, right? But it's an important part of the experience for so many of us as we grew up. And I think it enhanced the experience because it gave a sense of community even back then. What was your guys? I mean, you talked a little bit in the beginning about who the first one you came across, but certainly you have to be familiar with Vampira and Elvira, and maybe my horror host growing up, Stella, the man-eater from Mannion.
Oh yeah, she was great.
That Saturday Night Dead.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I wanted to just as an addition to the question, because I'm sure you guys can rail about this for a while. What is it that makes it that female horror hosts have actually dominated this field? Even though you have your Gelehrters and you have your, Joe Bob Briggs modernly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. But the female horror host is actually the most iconic. I mean, between Vampira and Elvira, and it seems like every market found their female horror host, and that stayed on the air a whole lot longer than most of the men, who tended to have like 3-year runs and then, shuffled off.
I'll go first. I think that, with a largely male audience watching late night TV, watching a sultry chick on the couch provide a seductive introduction to a horror movie is very alluring, especially because there's something seductive about horror. There's a reason with, like Dracula, the early versions of Dracula, for instance, Nosferatu, were very focused on the horror. But as horror became more popular, a lot of these stars, Bela Lugosi brought something very seductive when he played Dracula. Christopher Lee, all of these horror actors who have defined the genre have brought an element of seduction to it. So, late night TV, a woman in a tight, revealing black dress laying on a couch, making some it's exactly what people who are having a drink after they're home from work and trying to, it's what I think it's, and in especially, back when horror hosting really started, they were catering to a largely male audience. So I think that is why it became such an iconic thing, that people like a little flirting with their death.
I think it's that. I think you're right. But I also think there's that element of danger, of the femme fatale archetype, that there's that seduction, but there's also a danger to it as well. And that sort of a conflicting feeling, I think that creates something special that I think that lady horror hosts seem to have that aspect, going on, and I think that might play into that as well. I mean, certainly there are, like Zachary is pretty iconic, and Gelehrter and such. But I think you're right. There is that, particularly in the case of Elvira, who's doesn't really have the sort of the fatale aspect to it. Is more kind of a comedian. She came out of the Groundlings and stuff, but she has a great persona, and she's the most famous of the horror hosts. Vampira, though, does have that sort of edge to her, and I really always really liked Vampira a lot. I mean, I tend to like all the horror hosts. I always find something great to like about them. And Vampira, I love that she had a sort of a very dark sense of humor, an intelligent sense of humor about her. Just in that one clip that exists of her, you know, that where she's introducing, you can see why the audience was hooked by that, where she made the cover of what's Time magazine, or was it Lifetime? I think it was Time magazine. Was it Life? Yeah, you know, you can see why that happened. So and I think just in general, like even mention, you know, nowadays anybody can grab stream whatever they want. They can find where to put a DVD in, or most people are streaming now. But I think back to my uncle, Uncle Valdemar, and him kind of taking me by the hand and introducing me, come and see this, look at this spooky thing that you didn't know about that you might like, and getting me hooked in. And I kind of see it that way too. Like I'm trying to, as Penny, bring you into come and see this secret thing that I want to share with you, that you're going to think is cool, you know, that you're going to think is interesting. Shh, don't tell anyone. This is between us. Come on, come and see. Here's Carnival of Souls. You know, it's that kind of like, there's almost a camaraderie to it, like a secret little, kind of friendship that's going on with the horror host, you know. And I think that's really important. And that goes all the way back to like telling stories around the campfire. You see, as the spook shows came along with the host showing you strange things, and the radio horror hosts, you know, like the old witch and the hermit and the hermit's cave, and then you have the tales from the EC comics, all those horror comics that had a host. It's always this like this character or this persona who's like kind of like your weird, creepy friend who's maybe has a few screws loose, but is kind of awesome because they're going to show you cool stuff, you know?
Can I say that the horror host is your weird spirit guide into the unnatural?
Yeah.
There's something really special about hosted movies because, and I mean, even besides horror hosting, there are other hosted movie programs. I remember when I was going to college, I used to really like Dinner and a Movie, which is not a hosted horror show. It was just I remember a very good episode where they showed Pretty in Pink, and they were cooking because it was dinner and a movie, so they would always cook. And so the host had John Cryer over, and they were cooking. You know, John Cryer would tell his stories from making the movie, and with a hosted movie you get someone giving you the secrets of how the film was made, and you know, the behind the scenes things that you wouldn't otherwise get. But with the horror movies, I think the hosts are really like a spirit guide into the unnatural realm. Come, let me show you. Don't be afraid. I'll be with you the whole time.
Right, and they're kind of they're scary, a little scary, but a little funny at the same time, you know. So, and I think those are the most successful of the horror hosts, where there's a little bit of humor going on. I mean, there are some like dead serious horror hosts who I love too, and they're wonderful. But if you look at like the more successful ones, there's a humor element to it as well, because that makes them kind of more likable. I think, you know, to have that aspect going on, you know.
Well, I think too that harkening back to a more innocent age idea that is kind of embedded inside the horror host. The horror host could never have been invented today, right? It had to be invented in the past. There has to be that lineage to a simpler time when, you know, watching a horror movie cut up into 8 parts with commercials between those segments on a bad UHF broadcast where you had to play with the rabbit ears on top of your set. You need all that to create something like this. It wouldn't have happened in a clean perfect 1080 world, you know?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And plus, back at the time, they had local television stations. Everybody across the country had different horror hosts growing up because it was, what was your local station? Who did they have in Providence, Rhode Island, or in Boston, Mass? It's not the same guy that was in Chicago.
I've had some people at conventions groping up.
Groping up, yeah.
We won't go there.
That's a thing?
Yeah, sometimes.
Well, I apologize for that on behalf of all of mankind.
I would like to say, for what it's worth, the people who grope up are less the fans and more the more famous stars also at the convention.
I really wish I was surprised to hear that.
I have never had a fan actually try to lay hands on me, but I could name several people that I met at Rock and Shock. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this person is here. I want to go meet them. And one of them kisses me on the lips in front of my boyfriend. True story.
That's not the perfect situation at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because obviously the show, your show actually is it's a fairly friendly show. What I mean by that is it has an air of friendliness to it. It's not edgy in a dark way at all. It is edgy. It has edge because of the subject matter has edge, but it's a friendly show. I think anyone could just enter into it. It seems really weird to me that people with darker intentions would find themselves even, gravitating towards it.
You never know. I mean, we set out when this show started, I wanted it to be very much in the spirit of the classic horror host shows from that era, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I wanted to capture that feeling. And when we started the show, when we started kind of putting this together, we're in Massachusetts, and there's never been a witch horror host in Massachusetts. Surprisingly, you would think we did have a great horror host in the 70s named Simon, who was really twisted and awesome. But he's not as too well known, but he was wonderful. And we actually wound up finding some of his footage. And then prior to that, it was Feep, who was a little space alien who showed sci-fi movies. There's never a witch horror host. And I said, well, I was doing Medea, the Greek tragedy, and I was playing Medea. And backstage, I was like joking around, making really morbid puns with the kids, my children in the show, who I kill at the end of the show. Spoilers, like 3,000-year-old spoilers or whatever. But
yeah, the show's old enough that you don't.
Yeah, there's a moratorium on spoilers. Yeah, and it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the horror, because I at the time I was already trying to, I found out about Gula Gogo, who is a great show in New York and Long Island. We subsequently became friends with them, and then I found out about all these other horror hosts around the country doing their own shows using public domain films. And so I was like, it all kind of clicked at the same time, and around 2005, and I decided to do this witch character. And then Magoo, my husband, is always he was a huge fan of the Marx Brothers, and I just knew he would be a great physical comedian as a werewolf sidekick to Penny Dreadful, like her husband, but also kind of the goofball comedy relief character. And I asked him, "You want to be the werewolf? You don't talk. You just talk kind of like Scooby-Doo, and you're just kind of a Harpo type character." And he's like, "Yeah, baby, that sounds great." That was Magoo's person. "Yeah, baby, sure, sounds great." And he just took that ball and ran with it and turned it into this, like, kids loved Guru at conventions. We go to conventions. He was like the Pied Piper. I mean, the kids just loved him and he would never break character. I mean, never. I very rarely did, especially at first, but he was like very hardcore about it. And then our friend,
if he was the wolf, he wouldn't speak English to people. No. He wouldn't. If he was in a wolf form, he had the character on, and if he
growl and snarl and
exhausted,
roo.
if he needed a break, he would go and he would take everything off.
Yeah.
But and become human again before he would talk to people, because he didn't want to ruin the mystique of the guru character.
And I think that's one of the things that horror hosting has lost with the internet age, is like Morgus the Magnificent out of New Orleans. Like, he, even to this day, I mean, I think he's in his 90s, and he never breaks character when he does interviews and stuff. Never. He's Morgus. If you want to interview him, you're not going to interview Sid Noel. It's Morgus, 100%. It's kind of how it was, like Count Gore Duvall. Like, he will, at a convention, he will state he was Count Gore, and we wanted to do that too. But then when the internet, it's like it's a very difficult to maintain that sort of image, you know, that persona without people finding out more about you, you know. And then Ivan we brought in as the monster hunter. He was the friend I was talking about. He was my friend in high school, and he was involved with all of this stuff, and he was always sort of the contrarian. And I remember once in high school, we dressed up as vampires, and he showed up dressed as Van Helsing, which was hilarious. And so I do have a picture of Ivan with the Van Helsing getup. So I was like, I said, you want to be like the and kind of the frenemy of Penny Dreadful, who lives next door? And he's like, he whipped up this whole, you know, get up for him and stuff with a phony German accent. And so we taped like a couple episodes, and we were really trying to do that, like, I even did it in black and white at first. I wanted to do black and white to really do it as a throwback. No swearing or no like edgy, sexy material or anything beyond my, you know, bosom, you know. But other than that, you know, and then we did a couple episodes, and then, like Rebecca said, then we were doing this play, and I said, oh, we're doing this horror host thing, you want to come? And she came over, and she joined the gang like very early on. I think we had only shot maybe
it was the third episode. There exist 2 episodes of Shilling Shockers that I was completely uninvolved with.
Yeah.
And that was the pilot.
Yeah.
Which
we showed M. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the other episode 2? I was there.
Well, it was
we didn't air the episodes in the order that we shot them.
Yeah, it was the second episode we shot was the Sweeney Todd episode with Todd Slaughter, and I shot it at my grandfather's barber shop. My late grandfather was a barber, like old school barber with the, you know, with the foam and the straight edge razor and all that. So we showed the Todd Slaughter Sweeney Todd, and we went and shot that. And then that's when you joined. We shot some of that episode.
Yeah, I shot. All right, so maybe it was only one episode I had nothing to do with then, because you shot part of the Sweeney Todd without me, but then I was there that day. That's what when you're like, hey, you want to come over? Yeah. That we were shooting Sweeney Todd scenes that day, but I hadn't been there for all of the scenes. So I guess that was it. Yeah. I was there for everything else.
But the whole thing kind of came together that way, and we got it on local public access, like the first like places where we lived, and then from there our friends started putting it on there. So we were like, hey, can you put it on here? Can you put it on here? And then it just started to spread. You know, people would tell their friends, and they'd be like, hey, can I put your show? Can I get your show on in my town? Can I get? And then at one point we were on in over 200 cities and towns throughout New England, including Boston, Providence, Salem. We were on all 6 New England states. And then in other parts.
Not just New England. We were on in Virginia and
we were on
Pennsylvania.
And some UHF station in Nashville, which I think might even still run the show. It's like running it like random places that I would find out like, oh, we're on here.
Yeah, you know, it's when we started distributing through, there's this online community called pegmedia.org. And when we started distributing the episodes through them, then we would get requests from random stations around the country saying, oh, hey, I found your show on Peg Media. Can we run it? And
yeah, that was it. Sorry, we rambled on quite a bit there.
That's what the show is all about. So that actually covered exactly what my next question was anyway, which was to bring us back to how the show started. The show runs, again, for the better part of a decade consistently. And so how do you keep something like that fresh, considering that many people would just consider what you do a gimmick, and I don't feel it's that way. I think it's a narrative like any other, but you're showing movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very specific form. How did you keep it fresh for yourself?
I think, okay, so as the show went on, if you watch it all the way through, if you can manage to do something that, if you get some booze before you do that, the show evolved as it went on. Like, it started out as sort of being a throwback to the 60s horror host shows in black and white, but then we went to color. We were like, okay, let's do it in color now. And then we started doing, when we did color, we tried to do like the gel lighting. I was working for a lighting company at the time, and I had access to all these color gels. So Rebecca was lighting it, like trying to do like a Mario Bava film, or a Dario Argento film with a crazy gel lighting.
Colors of the Dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then so we Tim Lucas's book, The Many Colors of the Dark. And so we went into doing storylines. We're like, well, because we're doing like individual episodes that were just self-contained. You have like a hook in the episode that's kind of tied into the movie. And then we started doing, like, if this is the name of the show is Shilling Shockers and Penny Dreadful is the host, those were serialized stories, lurid terror tales, so we're like, well, let's have the show reflect its title. And we started doing ongoing storylines. Each one of the storylines was tied into the movie in some way. Like in the we started doing this in season 7, where Penny Dreadful starts to age to her true age, and she has to create this elixir that she drinks every year to maintain her immortality. And so the season starts with somebody stole the elixir, right? So she has to recreate it, and each episode is tied to the movie, is related to one of the ingredients she has to find. So the blood of a vampire. So we show a vampire movie. We do the dust from a living mummy. We did a mummy movie, etc. Eye of a Ghoul, and so as she's doing this, and then the mystery, she's trying to also figure out who stole this elixir as it went along. And so that worked out pretty well. Like, the audience seemed to respond really well to that. And so we continued doing that. And season 8, where we did a time travel story with Luna, with Rebecca's character, Luna, who is she's a genius she's an escaped mental patient, which we went to Danvers. That was another thing we did. We'd go to like actual locations in New England. You can't throw a rock without hitting a ghost here. There's weird stuff, vampire lore, werewolf lore, ghosts, all kinds of stuff. So we went to the Danvers before they tore it down and had her escape. But we did a time travel story with Luna, where every time period she goes to, the movie kind of reflects that. So she went to the 19th century in her time machine. We went, and it was Jekyll and Hyde. We went back to the Victorian London, and we had an adventure with Dr. Jekyll. And then she went to was it the 13th century or the 14th century for the Hunchback, and we showed the Hunchback.
Whatever the Hunchback of Notre Dame timeline was. I suck at names.
And then you went to the future, and we did Metropolis, and we're chasing her through time, and trying to find her. And then in season 9 was Penny loses her powers. Her bargain with the Fallen One. She loses her power. The Fallen One takes her powers away or something, and has to get her powers back. And there's a court trial in hell and all this craziness that we did. That was fun. But those ongoing storylines, I mean, they could get a bit complex, just trying to tie everything together. But it was a fun challenge, and it made the show kind of evolved in that direction.
So clearly, we do have a question in the chat, I'm seeing, but clearly the landscape has changed so greatly since the internet came on board, and high-speed internet became available in every house, and streaming services became the main way people were getting entertainment. What do you see as the future for the horror, not just for yourself, but I do want you to talk about that, but for horror hosts in general? Will we see another influx for that audience? And what do you think that looks like?
I kind of think that we already are. There are a lot of horror hosts that are streaming only now. And it's so much easier than it used to be. I mean, anybody with an iPhone can, prop it up on a desk and, you know, just talk into it and start streaming on YouTube or what have you. I know that Count Gore, who was on regular TV for a long time, now he doesn't he do almost everything online?
Exclusively internet. Yeah, he streams his own show, and then Mr. Lobo has his own Roku channel, the OSI channel, and then there's the Monster channel, which Halloween Jack runs, and he shows our show, but he shows most of the horror hosts. I think
he collects episodes from all of the working horror hosts.
Yeah, and he airs. But and then
it's easier now than ever.
Vortex, yeah, they're. I think that the Roku channels streaming is definitely where it's going. I mean, Joe Bob Briggs is back with Shudder on Shudder, and that was huge. Like when he came back, like didn't that crash the server or something because so many people were watching it.
And I think Shudder had no idea that was going to be as popular. I don't think they had any idea that the nostalgia for that character was going to be that great. And it just shows the endurance of all this.
Sure, absolutely. But I do think the internet is, sadly, I mean, one of the other things that we always were nostalgic about was local TV shows. You know, we grew up, I was born in the early 70s, so I remember local TV shows like Bozo the Clown and Willie Whistle and Captain Bob and Creature Double Feature and all these shows, Dana Hersey and the Movie Loft, Dialing for Dollars. And Ivan and I in high school, we would always reminisce about these shows. So that was another thing, let's bring back a local TV show. So that's why we would visit local places and make references to a local restaurant down the street or something like that, or stop by the comic book store and talk to the guy running the comic book, just things in the community that people would connect to. That's, I think, we're losing that a lot. And it's all because of money, because the stations, I mean, they make more money. It's financial. It's more lucrative for them to show infomercials and reruns of syndicated shows like Friends or Everybody Loves Raymond. So there are very few of those local TV shows anymore, sadly. So I definitely think the internet is sort of the new frontier for things of this nature, where it's kind of a wide open place where people can play and express their creativity and do many different shows. Whether that will be lucrative, it's highly unlikely. If you're going to go into this thinking you're going to make big bucks being a horror host, because I have bad news for you. That's what you think. It's like being in a garage band more than anything else,
Yeah, there's no money in this. You do it for the love of the genre.
So it's much like writing.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Griffin says, good evening. What is Danielle and Rebecca's favorite Vincent Price film?
Is that Professor Anton Griffin, I wonder? My favorite. Think so. My favorite Vincent Price movie of all time is 100% Theater of Blood. I mean, I love every Vincent Price movie, basically, but Theater of Blood was his favorite movie as well. And the wonderful late Diana Rigg, who just passed away, she also had an absolute blast in that film with Vincent Price. And you can tell they're having so much fun in the movie. And I think I showed Rebecca that movie. I think you watched that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I would have to say, all right, so I have two answers to this because I can't decide. The one that first sprang to mind was The Comedy of Terrors.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
Because that film is such a blast. God, I love that.
Dialogue of glory, yeah.
But if I were to pick a straight performance from Vincent Price rather than a tongue-in-cheek, I think I'd have to go with The Bat. I really like The Bat.
I was wavering between The Bat and Pit and Pendulum.
Oh, I love The Pit and the Pendulum. That's another good one. Oh, can I?
But I think just because The Bat is of a time period I'm more enamored with, I'm probably going with The Bat as well.
Yeah.
But I love both extremely.
But Comedy of Terrors is just so much fun because you watch him with his other horror icon friends just having a blast. Yeah. And there's something, I just feel so connected if I'm watching an actor clearly doing what is a love project rather than a job project, it's just it warms me on the inside.
my only gripe, I love Pit and the Pendulum. It might be my second favorite Vincent Price movie. My only gripe with Pit and the Pendulum is that Corman dubbed Barbara Steele. His voice in that movie.
All right. So I want to show you something I wrote at the beginning before we went on the air.
Okay.
At the very bottom it says, "How long can we go without mentioning Barbara Steele?"
I love Barbara Steele. I mean, she's wonderful.
Oh no, I'm obsessed. I did a series on Barbara Steele last October.
I was just watching her today. I was watching The Ghost. Actually,
The Ghost is incredible.
Yeah,
The Ghost is incredible. Lake of Satan just got a illegitimate Blu-ray release where it's basically it's a bootleg, but you can buy it on Amazon because no one's prosecuting anything apparently. But they cleaned it up. It looks amazing.
That's awesome.
Like, amazing.
She never. I feel like in recent years, I feel like she's gotten more cred. Like I felt like for years, a lot of the people in the classic horror community kind of just, when they would list their, like, the horror stars, they would leave her out, and I'm like, they'd say Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, and of course Karloff and Lugosi and Chaney and Laurie, but it's like they wouldn't mention Barbara Steele. And like, Barbara Steele is right there with them. Like, she is a legendary horror star. She is probably the last of the legends who is still with us from the the height of the horror, from the if you go from like the 20s into the 70s, that period, or 60s.
A year ago when I went into October, I wanted to do something that would be very on brand for this show, but also it was going to celebrate something that I think needs to be celebrated while the principal person is still here. So it had to be something kind of classic, because that's kind of, I mean, I love modern stuff. I do. I just, today the Friday 13th box set showed up. I love modern stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
But my heart is always going to be with what I grew up with. It's just going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said is actually the perfect synopsis of why I did it. It was just that when people discuss Lugosi and Karloff and Price and Lee and Cushing, it is a sin not to mention Barbara Steele.
Yeah, agreed.
You'll notice in our opening titles to our show.
Yeah, we do have her in there. Yeah.
We showcase what we consider to be our titans, and that, I mean, it starts out with, I think it goes Lon Chaney, Vincent Price, Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, and Barbara Steele.
We don't have
Karloff.
Do we have Karloff? We don't have Karloff in there, though. I think
we do not have Karloff in the opening shot. So if I can go on a tangent and just talk about the making of the opening titles to our show for a second. The opening titles to our show is a spell Penny is casting. It opens with a shot of, I believe, Lon Chaney as the Phantom of the Opera, and he turns, and then it fades to Vincent Price, who's turning from the other direction, and then it goes to a shot of Lugosi from
White Zombie.
God, what's the movie? White Zombie. Thank you. And then it goes to a shot of Christopher Lee in The Satanic Rites of Dracula, and then it goes to a shot of Barbara Steele from Black Sabbath, which fades into
Black
film reel.
Yeah.
Oh, Black Sunday. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. And then the film reel, you lower. No. It's a mirror with Barbara Steele's image that you lower into the cauldron, and then you pull back out a film reel that you have created, and then we put on the reel. And we do feature other actors in the opening. Like, we feature many iconic shots from old horror films, but the opening is just 5.
Karloff wasn't, and Karloff and Chaney Jr. were in the season 1 opening credits.
Yes.
Because I love Boris Karloff and Chaney Jr. too.
I was not dissing either of them.
And Peter Lorre's in the credits too. See, it was like, no, we went down that.
He's in the credits, but it's only
icon.
Peter Lorre only has his shoulder and back in the credits.
Oh, that's right. You put Von
because Dr. Von Bielo's face is superimposed over Lorre's face as he sees the M in the mirror.
Yeah.
From M.
But yes, agreed about Barbara Steele.
Oh, you're muted.
You're
Lorne.
muted.
Well, that makes sense. That just makes sense, because I think if you're a horror host and you're not obsessed with Barbara Steele, is a problem. But so Jacob asks, what are examples of serious horror hosts? I'm uneducated about what that looks like.
Oh, okay. So the one that comes to mind first and foremost was a horror host in Texas called Gorgon. His name was Gorgon. It was he was very simple. He was a sort of a gaunt looking gentleman with bangs, as I recall, and he had wore a black cape. And I don't believe there's any surviving footage of his show, but there's surviving audio of his show. And he was a huge fan of Gothic horror, of classic horror, and he didn't believe in doing comedic host bits. He played it completely straight. Like, he played this very sort of imposing, sort of ominous character. He had a great, sonorous voice when he would talk. And his introductions to the show were always very serious. These beautifully written sort of monologues that he would do where he would introduce the film. And I can't really replicate it, but think something, where he would say, the night is filled with shadows and creatures lurk in every corner. That sort of thing, like serious, not playing it for laughs. So he was a serious horror host. There were other horror hosts that fell into that category, but Gorgon is the one that comes to mind primarily. I think we lost Lorne. Did he fall off the?
No. He sent me. He'll be right back, but he wanted us to continue answering the question.
Oh, I just saw it. See, that's what I get for not wearing glasses.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, but Gorgon, he comes to mind primarily as sort of a serious horror. And I think if you dig around, you can find audio of him introducing the show, and it's really spooky sort of stuff. And then there was another one called The Shroud, and there is no surviving video, but The Shroud, I wouldn't say he was as serious as Gorgon was, but The Shroud was also in that cut from that cloth. Like, any humor may have been slightly sardonic, kind of like Simon. Simon was dark too, but had a sardonic sense of humor. But The Shroud lived up to his name. He wore a black hood you couldn't see his face, and a black cloak, and again, very dark introductions to the show, like that kind of very serious sort of delivery. Simon was wonderful. He was the Boston horror host, but I wouldn't say he was serious. I would say he was his own thing. Just like David Pumpkins, he's his own thing. He was a very twisted sense of humor, but it was humorous, but very sort of weird, dark, trippy humor, I guess. But yeah, check out if you can find the audio for Gorgon. If you look around, you should be able to find it. And that's a serious horror host. It's pretty awesome, actually. It's just played it totally straight. Yeah.
Griffin asks, can both Danielle and Rebecca name one horror film that truly frightened them?
Oh, sure. For me, it was when I was 13 years old. I decided one night that I was going to stay up late alone in my room and watch The Exorcist. And that was a bad idea because I didn't know.
Or a great idea.
Or it was a great idea. I take it back. It was an awesome idea. Not if I wanted to sleep and get up early the next day, but I didn't do that. I was absolutely freaked out by The Exorcist. It was terrifying. It was chilling, like, at the time, and it still is. It still holds up. My parents came from Portugal, very Catholic upbringing, so that definitely hit home in a sort of a scary kind of way, and seeing a little girl possessed by a demon and spewing profanity and all that. Just like the head spinning around and all of that. And then Exorcist 3 too. That's just that scene with the scissors, that stays with you.
That scene did freak me out because I'll never forget that it's like a long shot down a hallway, and from a great distance you see a nurse walk out of a room, turn and lock the door, and then turn around and start walking. And from the door she just locked, I always considered a locked door like a safe feeling.
Yeah.
Like this thing comes out with giant head pruning scissors, and the camera races forward, and it happens so fast, and you're not sure what just happened. That scared the crap out of me in Exorcist 3. But the first movie that really scared me was Burnt Offerings. It's kind of a lesser
Dan Curtis movie. Dan
movie.
Curtis.
It has Karen Black.
Yeah, Oliver Reed.
And I have to say that of all the movies that scared me when I was young, and then I went back and watched them as an adult, Burnt Offerings stood up pretty well. Like when I watched it, I was wondering, oh, am I going to laugh at little kid me for being so terrified? The answer is no.
Another possession movie. Ghost possession, yeah.
But the Burnt Offerings holds up really well. I watched it in the last year or two, and there's this pool scene where like you think the father's going to drown the kid or something. God, it held up really well. Yeah. And it didn't scare me as much, but I found it very disturbing.
Yeah. Now, Dan, this is a problem I had with, there was a recent documentary that came out about Dan Curtis. It focused on Dark Shadows, but it barely touched on things like Burnt Offerings, which was awesome. And then all of the other, he made so many awesome horror, Trilogy of Terror, like they touched on it, but they focused mainly on Dark Shadows, understandably. But then it was like they kind of went briefly over all these other horror films that he did, and then they talked about Winds of War and War and Remembrance. Again, I know that's a substantial thing that he did, obviously, but it's like he did all these great horror films that I think should be recognized. I think I'm gonna push this year to get Dan Curtis a Rondo Award posthumously, but he deserves like a Monster Kid Hall of Fame Rondo Award or something, because he did so many cool movies.
And I would just say that, and you've heard me say this before, people, but The Haunting of Julia, if you watch it in the middle of the night, will destroy you. So do that, and also Don't Look Now, which is a film that people know, but no one talks about it.
Yeah.
And
I have not seen either of those movies you just mentioned.
Oh, you need a double feature.
The Horror of Julia?
The Haunting of Julia. It's based on a Peter Straub novel called Julia. It's known as Full Circle in Europe.
Writing it down.
And it's a little bit hard to find. I won't lie to you. You'll have to probably find a stream of it, but you can find it. And it stars the great Mia Farrow. And you haven't seen Don't Look Now?
No. Unless I don't remember what it was
the thing
called.
is, these two films are kind of similar in a sort of way. They're both about, dead children, but they're both very, very scary films. And I recommend people. I love my silly horror, but I love my truly psychologically damaging horror too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A recent one that I watched was Rebecca came over and we watched. It was Hereditary. That movie was absolutely terrifying. I was like, wow, it takes a lot for like a horror movie to kind of get under my skin. But that was another one that's like, wow, that stays with you. It's just like, oh, that was there the whole time, and I just see it, and I'm really freaked out by that.
Hereditary is wonderful because it does loud and quiet horror simultaneously perfectly. And that's really rare. So, I mean, my favorite moment in that film, the most horrifying moment in that film to me is just, and I'm not going to spoil the movie because it's recent enough that a lot of people probably are still getting around to it, but it's just a character deciding to go to bed after something happens.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to rewind just to an earlier moment in that same character's evening.
Mm-hmm.
Something really bad happens. Mm-hmm. And right after the really bad thing happens, there are 2 minutes where the character is sitting in a car.
Oh,
and he knows he can turn around and see.
But he's holding on to that moment as long as he can.
Yeah.
Like 2 entire minutes of him thinking about turning around and not being able to turn around.
Yeah.
And it's like 2 whole minutes you sit with him in this dark car while he does nothing. It's all anticipation, and then it is followed by going to bed. But that was terrifying. It was such a good choice to hold that moment and be present in the moment of the horror that he was feeling.
Yeah. And I just want to say, because I've said it before, but Gabriel Byrne is the guy that holds that movie together, and no one talks about his performance because it's low key. Yeah. Toni Collette's great, but she gets all the show-stopping moments. So of course she's great, right? It plays right to her strength. But Gabriel Byrne just seethes that entire movie with a certain like ineptitude that is amazing. Because that whole movie is about not being willing to embrace any kind of change. Every character resists change in that movie. And he's the best example of that. He literally gets told, it's early in the movie, so I don't care about spoiling this. He's literally told that, the grandmother's grave has been robbed. And he just kind of closes the book on it and decides not to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an amazing film. It works on so many levels.
Yeah.
So that's a great call out. It's a great call out. So Griffin has another question. What is Danielle and Rebecca's favorite horror novel they've read that is not written by Stephen King?
Oh, geez, wow. Yeah, I could rattle off a whole bunch, but I think Jesus, this is a tough call.
There's just so many.
Yeah, it's a tough. I mean, I always tend to go classic, so I think probably my favorite horror it's a novella. I think more so was Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I just think it's a real. It's just such a cool little chilling story, and I went into it knowing like originally when this came out, people didn't know that Jekyll was Hyde. Like that's kind of a reveal in the story. Like we all know Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's his alter ego, but at that time people didn't know that. So it was kind of cool, kind of trying to put myself in the shoes of people during that time period. And I think it might be a tie with The Turn of the Screw, which I really love The Turn of the Screw as well. I mean, it's probably the greatest ghost story ever written, if you believe they're ghosts, which I do. I lean to. I'm in the ghost camp. I think there were ghosts. They were coming back to do some bad stuff. Miss Jessel and Peter Quint, and the film version is great too. The Innocents with Peter Wingard, isn't that? But
not so much this year's version.
I haven't seen it yet. It's not very
so much.
Yeah,
no.
Probably skip it. Yeah, I love the original film version of the adaptation from the stage play. But yeah, probably either that James's Turn of the Screw or Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a tough question. If I novel, I would have to say Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Oh yeah.
But honestly, I'm really passionate about just a lot of horror short stories. I'm a big Lovecraft fan.
Yeah. So
probably my favorite Lovecraftian story is The Shadow over Innsmouth. Danny already said Turn of the Screw, but I would have brought that up as well. Algernon Blackwood had like The Willows or The Wendigo.
Yep.
I'm very passionate about a lot of short stories in horror because I feel like the short story is such a perfect medium for horror because it brings you it's something that you can tell around a campfire. It gets right to the scare and then it leaves you there. Whereas with a novel, you have, it's a completely thought out story. Whereas that has all of the time to build the anticipation and then you have your climax, but then you have the denouement where everything gets resolved. Whereas in a short story, they're telling you a scary story and then they leave you at the scary moment. And that, I think, is just so effective in horror.
If folks have not gone and done it, just hit up your Robert Chambers.
Yellow.
Oh, awesome.
This is a new British edition of the book, and it's a wonderful edition of the book. It's restored as well to the original text. So, and what I really love about it is they cared this much. The end papers are yellow.
Oh, that's awesome.
I would like everyone to see this King in Yellow costume I created.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing.
This is just part. This is the headdress for the
Awesome.
green and yellow that I designed. I am a huge fan of that story.
Well, Rebecca runs for the Necronomicon in Providence. They do it every other year here, and it's a big H.P. Lovecraft convention in Providence. And Rebecca runs the Eldritch Ball and puts that together. And every time they do it, it's a different theme. Didn't you do? Was it Dagon or Innsmouth was the theme?
Oh gosh! So one year, the theme of the ball was Innsmouth, and the most recent year was Carcosa, which is yellow, and this was on display at the ball. We've also done Mountains of Madness. I wasn't always the person running it, but I've run the last 2 Eldritch Balls and intend to keep doing it into the future.
I need to get up there. Period.
If any of you guys are Lovecraft fans, Necronomicon in Providence is really a fantastic convention. They have both an academic side. There are like panels where Lovecraftian scholars come and talk about their works. There is like entertainment. They have filmmakers who have worked on Lovecraft movies come and speak. There are events. It's just there's gaming, like a whole huge part of the convention is Lovecraftian games, both RPG or tabletop board games. It's just a really fantastic convention that I've been really pleased. I've been to all of them so far and have been involved in running the last 2. So.
And the people who run that have a little store too, and
Lovecraft Arts and Sciences. They have a store in Providence at the Arcade Mall, and which is the oldest mall in America. And it's actually Lovecraft Arts and Sciences is a 501c3 organization, nonprofit that just works to promote and the works of Lovecraft.
So when can we get a Lovecraft stamp? God damn it! I'm serious. This needs to happen.
Contact your local USPS.
I'll be like, HP who? Love what?
Well, speaking of the Lovecraft Arts and Sciences organization, they've worked with Providence in the last decade that now there is an official intersection that is HP Lovecraft Memorial Square. Oh, they worked on an initiative to get a bust of Lovecraft in the Providence Athenaeum Library.
Oh, yeah.
And they have been doing the bronze statue project to put.
Is it going to be the same sculptor who did the Edgar Allan Poe one in Boston?
Yeah, it actually. So the one in. Oh, you mean the statue?
The Poe statue in like near where he was born.
Poe statue, because there was also a bronze Poe bust.
Oh no, I remember the statue. We went to the unveiling of the Poe statue in Boston.
Yes.
The one where he's in the sidewalk carrying the telltale hearts falling out of the briefcase and the ravens bursting out.
Right.
I thought I had heard it was
remember
the
who
same
that sculptor was offhand. The one in Providence who's working on the full-size Lovecraft statue, I believe, is Gage Prentice.
Okay.
I cannot remember the name of the sculptor who did the Poe statue off the top of my head, but we could probably Google it.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much, first off, for coming on in and talking. I mean, this show has become very focused on literature, obviously, in recent weeks. And I really wanted to do something to celebrate the other side of the Halloween spirit. And you guys are the perfect example of that because you live and breathe this stuff. And if nothing else got accomplished tonight, everyone came out of this knowing you're one of us.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. And I'm on the other side of the coming attractions. I definitely want you to let everyone know where they can keep up with everything you're doing from this point out. And hopefully I will be able to connect up with you guys at maybe Necronomicon one year.
Sure.
But can one of you or both of you ask me what's coming up on the show?
Yes. What's coming up on the show, Lorne?
Please,
well, thanks for asking.
Wow, that is a great lineup.
Oh, we're not done for the month. We have some crazy stuff coming up before the holiday. The holiday.
Nice.
You know, the only one that really matters.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So how can everyone stay in touch with everything you guys got going on? And how can they, catch up perhaps on the previous seasons?
Well, we have a website at www.shillingshockers.com. We have video clips up from every episode that we've done in all of this, not like the whole show, but we have a 2 to 3 minute clip from every show that we've done so far. We have some full episodes posted to our Vimeo channel, which you can find from the main page of the website. Do you have anything to add, Danielle?
We also have you can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Penny Dreadful Shilling Shockers. I also have my Facebook page is, if you look up Penny Dreadful and you see my picture with a witch hat on, that's me. Not to be confused with the Showtime series, which I am not affiliated with. And it was
we came first.
I was doing a little too scary. They said, "Can we use your name?" No. They were like, "We can't show you in the show because people might be too scared." If you look us up on Facebook, we're there. We have DVDs at our store. If you go to the Shilling Shockers shop, you can get there right through our website. Just go to the store section, and we have DVDs. We have T-shirts. As Lorne is wearing here, we have a comic book that was done through Comic Book Divas. How terrifying! And then we have a bunch of stuff, pictures, lots of neat, wacky merch, fan club kits, cool stuff. So if you're good Halloween gifts or bad ones, depending on how you look at it.
Sometimes curses are the best kind of gift you can give.
You're a man after my own heart, my own black carapace of what used to be my heart.
Well, I collect hearts, actually, but the problem is...
Splendid. Delightful.
The problem is when, winter gets a little bit long, you can't get out to the supermarket. Every year you lose a few to lunch or dinner. So
Such a shame. Such a shame.
Thank you again, ladies, for coming on board. Thanks for everyone that participated in the chat. Looks like we had a lively chat among them out there.
Nice.
I hope to see all of you coming up on Saturday evening for Nancy Kilpatrick. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank
you too.
Have an excellent evening.
Crisp, flavorful fish sandwiches, golden brown and crunchy outside, and tender and juicy inside for a snack or a meal.
Hey, somebody's crazy. Papa goes the weasel. Everybody knows the weasel blows.
We have lots of pretty pickles waiting for you at the refreshment center. They're plump, tender, mouth-watering. Wouldn't one taste good right now?